So my name's Jonathan Symonds. I'm the CMO here at MinIO, and hopefully over the next 20 minutes or so, I can sort of obliterate that notion that exists in the room that open source is for hackers and hobbyists, and that it's not enterprise grade, and that it's really generally deployed here and there, but in small bits and not at scale. That's my goal, to talk to you about how we got there, and more importantly, where we are today. So one of the things about MinIO that I think few people understand is how truly widely deployed we are. So we are on every single continent, and that includes Antarctica, right? As of this morning, we had 305 million Docker pulls. We're doing about 425,000 a day at this point, right? And we're going to show you some of the growth curves on that here in a second. We have over 20,000 GitHub stars. Those are given freely by developers. You can call them bookmarks, but you can also call them likes. Whatever you call them, we got a lot of them, right? Next is that we have about 6,561 members in our Slack channel. We add about 10 to 12 a day. So those are people who are coming into our public Slack channel and getting support on our product. And we offer that freely. It is manned by some of our best engineers, by our co-founders, by AB himself, right? It's an extraordinary experience that is only eclipsed by what we do in Subnet, which is our paid subscription support tier. And then finally, we have 507 contributors. I think in the Storage Unpacked podcast you were doing the other day, we were at 499. We're now at 507. And that speaks to the health of what it is that we're doing. We're attracting some of the best developers in the world. It's actually how we find some of our best employees, and we think it's a huge testament to where we're going as a company. Now, the growth, as you might imagine, is exactly like you talk about in a hockey stick. Because we are 100% open source, because what somebody pays us to support and may pay us millions of dollars for, and what you can download off of GitHub are the exact same thing, we have reduced all the friction involved with adopting our product. And that's what you see here, right? You see our Docker pulls up over 300 million. You see our new unique users just going up and to the right. And you see our direct downloads all growing at these exponential rates. In fact, the Docker rate is actually somewhat depressed versus the other growth metrics because we have been Docker out of the gate. We have been cloud native out of the gate, and we have been in containers since the get-go. And the orchestration numbers have rapidly moved toward Kubernetes, but that's why that number is not in the 200s or beyond. Part of it comes in terms of developer traction. If you look at this slide and you say to yourself, all right, this is the landscape for open source object storage, software-defined object storage. What does it look like? Well, this is what it looks like. It looks like MinIO is 3 times as popular as Ceph, right? It's 20 times as popular as Swift. There's probably a good reason that Swift decided to change its business model, because they're not competing at this point with us, right? We're at 20,000 GitHub stars and growing. And look at the growth rate for what we're doing versus the growth rate for those other 2 companies. It's not even on the same scale. Right? And so this is something that is happening in the marketplace today, and we're seeing it across a number of enterprises across every continent.
What's the vertical axis there? Stars?
Yes, that is stars. So this would be 20,000, and then this would be 2,000. So.
It's hard to fake, so we use that as a metric. But generally, we look at any metric we pick should be a general reflection of the trend. So we found this one to be hard to cheat.
Can I ask you a question? Because, when you talk about developer traction, okay, yes, a lot of downloads, pulls, whatever. It's not comparable to Ceph. You don't, MinIO can run in my PC, while Ceph needs at least like 9 nodes. So the kind of downloads are totally different. So it's strong on the developer side, but maybe with Ceph and Swift, it's not the right comparison.
We're absolutely going to address that here in just a second. It's a great question, Enrico. It's a great question, and we'll show you what we call enterprise adoption firsthand, okay? So speaking directly to that, so MinIO, 50% of the Fortune 500 runs MinIO. 84 of the top 100 companies in the Fortune 500 run MinIO. Right? And we're going to get into more details on exactly who those companies are and let you draw your own conclusions from our data, and you look at that, right? And these aren't just 1s and 2s. These are 10s, 20s, 30s, 200 different people from a single organization downloading, consuming documentation, showing up in our remix, all of those things, okay? In the last 90 days, so the data that I pulled to put these slides together, we did about 54,000 different instances of MinIO that were tracked, okay? Which isn't all of them, but that's the ones that we were able to track from a download perspective, okay? That represents 10,000 different organizations. And you probably are undering that by maybe even a factor of 10, because a lot of those are sitting behind an IP that might say Amazon or Qumulo or whatever else might be there, and we don't actually see the individual organization. But it's anywhere between 10,000 at the absolute bottom end and 100,000 at a reasonable assumption, different organizations that are running MinIO, okay? That's a huge number.
And then 900K discrete instances would be containers? Is that how you count those?
So if you break up the numbers by any means and slice, right, you will see, say, let's take Kubernetes. Actually, you have some Kubernetes numbers to show in the subsequent ends, right?
Yeah.
We do find that majority of the infrastructure, particularly the cloud ones, they come out of public cloud into us, and they actually want the same public cloud experience. So we find many of them are going containers, and when you look at what containers, they actually all are Kubernetes. And we do have like bare metal deployments too, but they are dwarfed by now Kubernetes growth. This happened in the last just 3 years.
But they may be discrete instances where you have within a single organization 100 different configurations that say Docker, Kubernetes, distributed XL. So
I'm just trying to understand what a discrete instance would be. It would be a container running MinIO S3 website. Is that?
Oh, these are actually, we find in terms of the application use case, these are basically, actually there are slides on that too. We can go deeper into that. These are like say, whether big data application to medical imaging to all kinds of, like these are enterprise application use cases we find. We can go into those details more.
I don't think that's what you're asking, Ray. I think you're asking, is that 900,000 clusters, 900,000 separate deployments?
Yes. So some things we cannot know because if I am collecting that specific information from the community, I cannot. Even if I am proprietary, I cannot without a user consent, right? So we look at like overall the trends and multiple data points and then correlate and infer. Like say looking at like how what are in terms of the feature request to documentation to everything like the way we know that this is, say, it's a deep learning workload. Then they actually, how do we know? These guys actually use us on a TensorFlow type environment, and then that's where the optimizations, issues, bug requests come. So that is how we are able to correlate the use case into an application. Otherwise, we cannot collect any data without user consent. The whole point of MinIO is private cloud and the data sensitivity. If we only take any information from them, it's going to violate those core principles. So when you are behind WAN, we cannot tell that the WAN IP, we can't even tell the node count reliably. But when people deploy us in the public cloud, we know we have more than 1 million unique IPs on Amazon alone. We actually tell them, don't do it, use S3, but there we know the actual node count. But when it's private cloud, we only see the WAN IP. But even when we see the WAN IP by any means, those numbers are so huge, and we know the actual numbers are even larger.
that help? Yes? No? Maybe? Okay. So next is it's across 153 countries. So North America is clearly the leader in that, followed by Europe, and then we move into Asia. And specifically, you can see the US represents about 20% of those downloads. And again, Germany is right behind, and you have a whole suite in here in Russia that kind of speaks to the global nature of that. Again, we're deployed in Antarctica. The Australian Antarctic scientific research team has us down there. I think we're the only ones that have every single continent covered. But it's a global reach for MinIO. And again, you would expect that out of an open source company, but the depth and the breadth by which we are deployed is pretty significant. From an industry perspective, I think is the other piece of this that's very, very important to understand. So ultimately, we are very, very big in the tech space. So software or technology, and technology defined by people who make things, so to speak, represents a significant portion of that. But financial services and healthcare are the other two primary industries that you see up here. And then we have very, very strong concentrations in area like automotive, where there's a very small number of players. It's not going to show up, but it's a huge part of this graph. But we are in almost every single automotive use case, primarily around a very lightweight edge, automotive, autonomous driving support structure for that. So you can see that across pretty much every single industry. Now, we don't have any specific industry focus. I know that the concept of we're everything to everybody is something that's hard, but this is, again, with no friction involved, you can reach all this broad industry, and you can actually get a lot of learning from that. And where we focus our time and effort from a sales perspective, to your question earlier around Subnet, is in the area of financial services and healthcare. It's also across configurations. So again, pulling our data from Remix, which I'll show you here in a second, 62% of all of our instances are containerized using Docker, right? And so that speaks to the fact that we were in this early, we are cloud native, it's in our DNA, and so this is how people are adopting us. And it's a different crowd of people that adopt MinIO for their problem set than it is for somebody who's looking to do standard archival or standard backup or things like that. Yeah? You have a question?
Oh, no, I'm just looking. It doesn't look like that adds up to 100%.
Across all this?
Yeah.
It shouldn't,
Okay.
because they're different snippets. From a Kubernetes perspective, 7% of all of our instances are running Kubernetes, and 62%, or 43% of those who are containerized today. Okay. Gateway mode. So gateway mode is something that we have obviously taught the world how to speak S3. We allow Azure to speak S3, GCS to speak S3. We allowed Alibaba to speak S3, NAS, Backblaze, all of these elements to speak S3. And gateway is something that many, many people adopted us for early on. But that has become a very, very small portion of what it is that we look at from those 853,000 instances. It represents only 3% of that total. And then obviously, as you might imagine, as a DevOps-oriented organization, Linux is the dominant technology that we experience in terms of our platform.
So the organizations that are using Windows, or they're just running web applications?
We found that the enterprise still is mostly Java shop, right? And they are running some kind of Spring framework, like some JBoss, and they're actually running on they do the development and then they deploy it on VMware. And at that point, they simply deploy it on whatever commercial environment the IT can support. So I was actually surprised to see the amount of Windows still is there on enterprise market.
So I think the other piece that people don't fully appreciate when they think about what MinIO is doing at this point is that we're powering the product offerings of some of the biggest names in technology and some of the most bleeding edge companies in the technology space. So Splunk, as many of you know, runs 4 nodes of MinIO embedded in their new DSP. So their digital stream processing product runs 4 nodes of MinIO baked into that product. And they're looking to add more MinIO to their stack. They find it to be lightweight. They find it to be highly performant. And it allows them to really kind of scale as they need to. Nutanix, as I think most people in this room also know, Nutanix Buckets, which is now renamed Nutanix Objects, is MinIO, right? It's right there in the documentation. It's our browser. It's our code. That is powering that offering from Nutanix. Qumulo, great partner of ours, right out there, recommends us as the object storage of choice for that distributed storage platform. Datera, same thing, right? Great company doing really, really interesting cutting edge things, and they have standardized on MinIO. Right? And so they've put out a lot of tutorials about that experience, about how simple it is, and how easy and how quickly it scales in their world.
It sounds like you can be a gateway to an object store.
We are the underlying object store in these environments.
So there it's a block store underneath. So either we can run on JBOD or it can be SAN. Like say Qumulo is actually a backend is their own file system. So we can turn a file system into object storage, turn a block storage into object storage. The block storage, the primary standalone MinIO deployments are all JBODs. But if you already have invested in something else or some other storage vendor, they want to add S3 capability, then they bring their backend file system or their backend block store.
I see. Thank you. This extends obviously into the enterprise. McKesson has a radiology product that they sell obviously into their end clients. That's powered by MinIO. Has been for several years now. Portworx, obviously recommends MinIO. It's a great pair for the simplicity and the power of their product and the simplicity and power of our product. And again, we are the recommended object store there. IBM even recommends MinIO for their private cloud Kubernetes deployments. And you'll see that in some of the stats we show you here in a second. But again, that's a huge feather in our cap that some of the largest players in this market are using MinIO, baking it into their product, and then selling it down to their clients down the road. And that includes Cerner.
So IBM has their own object storage.
High cost.
Yes, cloud object storage. They do.
And they're still recommending MinIO for their customers using Kubernetes?
Inside Kubernetes.
So there are two things. IBM has many products. Like one is IBM's CleverSafe, and then even their GPFS is in some sense coming in, right? But the primary thing is CleverSafe, and then you would now see Red Hat. Ceph and Gluster also has object, right? But the problem we see, they actually find is end of the day, customers demand something, and when that happens, you cannot avoid. So they actually integrated MinIO into IBM Cloud Private, which is their Kubernetes. Even I'm so surprised to see the numbers that Red Hat. If you see our usage metrics is very high. I have no idea what they are using it for, but I was at Red Hat for some time. My gut feeling would be that Red Hat actually is an open organization. Like the Kubernetes team, whatever they pick, the storage BU cannot really force them. So probably it's like a Trojan, right? We're growing inside.
So also Datacor uses your technology, right? Or not? Who? Datacor.
Docker?
Datacor.
Datacor?
I don't know them, but there are actually the list is quite long. We just put something to show just the broad one. But actually, there are many storage companies, even just the data products, data processing products. Like they all say, for example, Robin Systems, right? If you look at inside, they're using us inside. H2O.ai, many
SendIO across the street.
Yeah.
Uses us. I mean, it just.
Yes.
Yeah.
The list goes on.
Handy for tech support.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's easy for them to get there.
Are you able to charge them something for all, they are using the product at the end, they need some support. I know they have developers, and they can get...
Can answer that. So the problem is that when a customer comes to us, right, it's very easy for me to make a case, right? But will NetApp resell EMC's product, right? That's my problem. That one storage company giving OEM license to another storage company, and then we are not here to just give a component so you white label and sell. It's very hard for them to hide the fact that it is MinIO, and when they promote us, it just becomes a hard case. And also, in terms of the pricing, we are a standalone enterprise product. Now, if we become a significant chunk of their product revenue, it starts hurting. Now, the only way you can fix that is we take a small cut, but we are in this business directly as well. So I couldn't come up with a model where two storage companies, one storage company taking core product. Object storage is not an accessory, right? If I'm a backup or some tool, it makes sense. Being a core product, I couldn't establish an economics where our case is justified. But we actually say, you guys are helping us establish ourselves in the market. In return, you buy some time. You are only promoting us. We actually encourage this because of Apache license. They can do it legally.
So, yes.
Yep. All right. So I wanted to point out this slide, and I'm going to actually show you a quick brief look at Remix as well, which is our internal product as well. This slide's a little tough to see from the back of the room, but what it tells you is that we obviously, as an open source company, have built a relatively sophisticated listening mechanism to find out what companies are on our site to basically ascertain who's got the highest level of interest, because that's the interest we want to go convert from a business model perspective. And so we have a lot of listening things. This is actually one of our HubSpot screens. But this is HubSpot screens of our top 25. Actually, I had to go 26 because it's 13 on each side. Companies that aren't ISPs. And you'll see basically all of them have close to 70 or more individual users consuming documentation of MinIO. So that means you wouldn't have 70 people inside your organization consuming MinIO documentation if you weren't doing something relatively significant.
Who are the top 3 listed?
Top 3 is Intel, IBM, and Symantec. Number 4 is Apple.
Okay.
So Apple, for example, has 420 different unique users consuming more than 1,000 pages of our documentation. So I'm not going to stand here and make a pronouncement as to who and who is not our customers, but I am going to let you draw your own conclusion that from this list, you'll find not only some of the largest banks in the world, you'll also find some of the largest object storage companies in the world, right? All consuming our documentation. And that can be for one of 2 reasons. One is we're serving a niche for them in terms of a high performance object store, which they're using, or 2, they're looking to look at our documentation and see if they can figure out what it is that we've done that allows us to grow at this rate, right? So you'll see everybody from Nutanix and Wells Fargo to JP Morgan, HP in there. You'll see partners of ours like Teradata. You'll find large clients like United Healthcare. You'll see folks like VMware, who obviously has a keen interest in the Kubernetes space.
It's also a similar profile. The same profile you will see if you see the Slack members. These are all architects of those companies hanging out in our Slack channel. Similar profile.
I sense some incredulity.
They have access to the source code. If they want to find out what you're doing, they just crack open the source code. I mean, why do they have to, why are they using your documentation? I don't know. I don't know.
I used to do that all the time. You want to find out what your competitors do. Look at their
From a competitive analysis perspective, I agree. But you don't have like 500 people doing competitive analysis on MinIO.
Well, that's what he was saying, right? I think is that the people doing 500 are the ones actually doing something with it.
I didn't say that explicitly.
But
That's what I took.
you have a valid point. You will see the same names also appearing in the usage data as well. It's not only they're consuming documentation. You see actually MinIO instances showing up. Actually, Jonathan if you can show. So that is like they're not only consuming documentation. So I don't know what they're doing because we can't know that ever, right? We can only indirectly correlate when the application surfaces or when they document it in their product documentation, then we find out.
So I'm going to just show you a handful of screens from Remix. So Remix is an internal tool that we built. It allows us to get a sense and a handle on what people are doing, how they're using MinIO, and how broad the reach is. All the statistics I showed you earlier in terms of growth patterns are a function of this data that we see in Remix. The 893,000 instances that we did over the last 90 days or last month or whatever, came out of this product here. Okay? But what you'll see here, this is the top level view, is you're going to find Amazon, Google, Azure, right? These are all companies basically where people are running MinIO inside of the public cloud. And the reason they're doing that, those reasons differ. We don't recommend doing that, but fundamentally there's a level of convenience, there's a level of cost savings, or there's something else that's causing them to develop and learn in the cloud using MinIO, right? And so you'll see these massive, massive instances, right? Total usage, and that's 227 million types of instances inside of AWS. You just go down one page, right? So we get past those folks. Now you're into the colos, right? So these are all colocation providers, and you can start to see this kind of level of data. And so now this pattern changes, right? So you may be learning in the cloud, that's where the most usage is, but then you step down one little bit and you start to see all this colo data. And so from there, they start to actually migrate this back to the private cloud. And where you see that data is in here. So I'm just going to show you a quick look at all the public companies that are currently running MinIO. And this is ranked by order of usage, so you get a sense of kind of how significant it is. You saw JP Morgan on the last slide. You see him here. You see EMC. You see Target, Honeywell, Boeing, Motorola, Walmart, Capital One.
How do you where did this data come from? Like, how did you determine who?
So the nice thing about this modern cloud native world is they no longer update like once in 3 years or something, right? They actually are. We make new releases once a week. Often it's even some like security updates, critical bugs. We actually even rush it immediately. That's how cloud native world works, right? No one knows what version of Amazon they are using. It's always the latest. So we keep pushing new updates, and they keep pulling new updates. So when they pull updates, we know they not only are downloaded. I don't care if you downloaded. A lot of downloads goes waste. They downloaded, tried it, okay, they throw it, right? But we care about whether they are using it. How do we get this data? When they actually pull the updates, from the update log, we can actually tell that they're actually using it.
Is that from the data they put into register when they set it up, or is it
So when
IP address, or you're doing a reverse lookup on?
yeah, we actually
Reverse look up on the IP address.
yes. So
But they're not actually entering any registration data or anything like that. We're making note of what they downloaded, what configuration they downloaded, when they downloaded, and so forth. And so you can see, which ones are which. And I can search for, you can see all these are the Kubernetes downloads, right?
Yeah.
Across all that, you can
So
see.
for that could be anyone pulling it down from their marketplace, or
Sorry.
for something like Azure and Amazon, would that be for somebody that's pulling it down via?
Are you plugged into their marketplace?
We actually have a marketplace offering, but this one, like end of the day, wherever you downloaded it from, right? You could have compiled it from source, but when the instances, like when they are actually running, they also check for first time when it comes up, it checks there is a new version available, and then so it tells you, hey, this is running an old version. So based on that, they actually go and take a new version. But if you downloaded it, ran behind firewall, we will never know. If you are actually if you're behind WAN, I will not know any details about it. But the thing is that even what happens is that, like say today, if you download it here, right, it will not show as MinIO. This data is actually only a subset of the data because this IP, our WAN IP, has to be registered to the organization. Only large organizations can afford to do that. Many of their organizations, their branches, their WAN IPs are not registered. But from even that subset data, we are actually able to see that how big it is.
Can I?
One point, like so how do we correlate? How do we get the organization name? There is a database called MaxMind database. If you can, basically if you take the IP and then if you look up, it tells you that this IP is registered to this organization. Sometimes like they categorize, even enterprises categorized as residential or business. You can ignore that, but you do get a good idea of this IP belongs to say EMC Corporation or IBM Corporation. That's how we actually are able to get this.
So it's clear that the product is really popular, or better, the open source project is really popular, but it's not clear how you monetize the product.
Yep. So we're going to spend a fair amount of time talking about Subnet specifically. So Subnet is the subscription support offering that comes along with our product. We have dozens of clients. We have 7-figure clients for that. We're not going to release names, but large financial institutions, large tech companies are paying us 7 figures per year in order to give them support. And when you see the Subnet experience, you'll understand why. It is fundamentally different than even the support we provide on Slack, which is considered to be the finest in the open source world. We've set the standard on that. Subnet is a unique blend of software and engineering expertise in a real-time format that we, again, built from scratch in the same way we built Remix from scratch to allow us to understand kind of what the world looks like from an adoption perspective. So we're going to get into that. We got a whole module based just on that subject right there. But that's the question that we get from investors. It's the question we get from clients, right? How do I understand the viability of this by understanding what your business model is? And once they see Subnet and once they understand who else is in Subnet, it actually goes relatively well for us. But it all starts with having a 100% open source, no friction approach to this because it allows anybody to start. And we get the shadow IT. Shadow IT starts to build, and you end up with these giant instances like we have, you saw with Apple, where you have 400 different people all consuming documentation. And that's obviously not because it's fun, right?